There are four main colligative properties of a solution. Before we go and talk about those properties, we have to mention what a solution actually is defined as. So a solution actually has two components. It has a solute. So here I have some sugar, and the solute is any agent that is going to be dissolved. So sugar, sodium chloride, vitamin C powder, Kool-Aid powder, anything. It can be covalent, it can be ionic. This basically comprises the solute. The solute is going to go into the dissolving agent. The dissolving agent is the solvent. Now in general chemistry class, usually the solvent is water. If you go to organic chemistry, the solvents are going to be something different, maybe like pentane or cyclohexane or methanol. So the solute is basically the thing that's being dissolved. The solvent, as I've shown here as water, is the dissolving agent. So if you mix some of the solute with the solvent, you'll get a homogeneous solution for a majority of solutes, and basically you now have a solution. So a solution is nothing more than a solute plus a solvent. Add a solute with the solvent and you will get a solution. So I've mixed my solute, which was glucose or some sugar, in my solvent water, and it's all dissolved, and now I have a solution. So colligative properties has to do with the new type of properties that this solution has relative to solvent alone. So there are basically four main colligative properties. So this solvent, again water, has a boiling point. So that boiling point for water, as we know, is 100 degrees C. So the question is, what is the boiling point now of this new solution that contains water and a little bit of the solute sugar that I've added to it? Well, it turns out the first colligative property is boiling point elevation. So while this boiling point of water alone is just 100 degrees C, the boiling point of water plus my new solvent, as the boiling point of water plus my new solute, is going to be a little bit higher. It will be greater than 100 degrees C. Second colligative property has to do with the freezing point. So the freezing point of pure water alone, my solvent, is 0 degrees C. Now the freezing point of the new water with the solute added, the freezing point of my new solution, in which solute has been added to my solvent, is now going to be lower. So that's my second colligative property, freezing point depression. The third colligative property has to do with vapor pressure. So remember, vapor pressure is quoted at a specific temperature. So the vapor pressure of water alone by itself at some temperature will be a value. Now the minute I add a solute to my solvent, the vapor pressure will now be lower, because now the solvent has to now overcome solvent-solvent interactions and also solvent-solute interactions in order to exert a vapor pressure. Here you only have solvent-solvent interactions to overcome to exert a vapor pressure. So the third colligative property is vapor pressure lowering. The fourth and final colligative property has to do with osmotic pressure. So the solvent alone has no osmotic pressure. The solvent, the minute you add a solute into it, and the minute you add a semi-permeable membrane, water is going to rush out. So water rushes out of that semi-permeable membrane to neutralize whatever solute molecules are there. So in the case of biology, anything that has a cell membrane, a semi-permeable membrane, you're going to set up an osmotic pressure. So the solution has an osmotic pressure, whereas the solvent alone by itself does not. So what is the reasoning behind colligative properties, and why is the term colligative used? Colligative means that it doesn't matter whether I add salt or whether I add ionic salt like sodium chloride, or here glucose, sugar, or if I add a covalent compound. So it does not matter the weight, and it does not matter how much I add. I could add a little bit, I can add a lot. I can add 1 crystal of salt, I could add 10 crystals of salt, I could add 5 grams of salt. Same thing with glucose. I can add 1 particle of glucose, I could add 10 grams of glucose. It doesn't matter. All four of these colligative properties, freezing point depression, boiling point elevation, vapor pressure lowering, and the generation of an osmotic pressure. No matter how much I add or how little I add, all of these four properties are going to be universal. Colligative properties are universal, and that is the fundamental difference between a solution and a solvent. Four new properties emerge immediately after I add a solute to a solvent to generate a solution. Here's an example of osmotic pressure. So here is some salt water, and here are some pieces of ginger. So ginger, that's soaked in vinegar. Ginger has cells that are hydrated, so all cells have some water in them. Our cells have about 70% water in them. So if I take this piece of ginger and just set it in this water that has salt, or the salt water bath, water from the ginger cells will escape and try to neutralize the salt in the salt water, which is in the solution. And they'll neutralize the salt molecules that are in the solution. Again, that is the definition of osmotic pressure. Water escaping to neutralize the solute that is contained in the solution. And this happens in our cells, this happens in plant cells, this happens in other types of cells, eukaryotic, prokaryotic cells. Osmotic pressure. It involves a semi-permeable membrane, in this case the cells of the ginger. Water is leaving and escaping to neutralize the salt in the salt water.